Hi, my name is Tongro, and this is the Destruction Solo Challenge to unlock its artifact Hidden Appearance. If you don't want to listen to the commentary, the fight breakdown, talent choices, etc., there's a timestamp on screen for you to jump ahead to my kill of the fight, and thanks for coming if you decide to do that. Okay, still here. Let's get right into it. Artifact-wise, I only had 40 traits in Destro, so by the time the second and subsequent Mage towers are built, you'll probably be more progressed than I was. Onto talent choices, the first row is standard, backdraft. Roaring Blaze I wouldn't recommend because the fight is too hectic to be able to fully utilize this talent, and there aren't enough adds to justify Shadowburn over backdraft. Second row is a little counterintuitive, especially if you raid and or do a lot of dungeons. Empowered Life Tap is probably your go-to on this row. The caveat is that in a raid setting and in a dungeon setting, you have incoming heals from a healer. A little bit from your imp, but basically you can abuse this talent to eke out some more damage at the expense of doing some damage to yourself. This is a solo fight, and therefore any health damage you take, like Life Tap, you will have to be the one to regenerate it through Life Tap. That is really your only means to regenerate life with Destro. You don't want to drain life as Destro if you can help it. This fight also has a lot of moderate damage incoming, and if you have to Life Tap every 20 seconds to maintain this buff, you're just making it that much harder on yourself. So I recommend taking reverse entry, and that means you won't have to Life Tap at all. Third row, Demonic Circle is pretty useless because you don't need to really move anywhere quickly. I'd recommend taking Mortal Coil over Shadow Fury because it's instant cast and gives you some much needed heals. You're going to be using either of these, whichever one you choose, as a second interrupt on the boss, and we'll get into that later. Fourth row, some take Fire and Brimstone, but I didn't feel like I was getting enough benefit from it over the single and 2 target damage increase from Soul Harvest. If you take Fire and Brimstone, it's really useful for Phase 2 to deal with the adds and for the totems that spawn throughout the fight. In my case, I use Soul Harvest on cooldown pretty much. Cataclysm would be useful if there were more adds and if they were closer together, but they really aren't, so go with one of the other two. For the fifth row, take Fell Armor. It's really good to deal with the consistent damage you're taking, especially later in the fight. Burning Rush is useless again because you don't need to get anywhere quickly. Dark Pact is less useful than Fell Armor because Dark Pact is really meant for semi-frequent bursty damage, not really for consistent damage like in this fight. And for the instances of where you're going to take bursty damage, you really want to use Unending Resolve, or you have the ability to use Unending Resolve instead. For the sixth row, take Supremacy, specifically Doomguard. You need his interrupt, that's why you're taking it. The interrupt is on a 24-second timer. He's also useful to ping the totems if required. The last row, Wreak Havoc. There's consistently 2 or more targets to deal with, so it's an obvious choice. Onto gear. My item level was 907 when I killed this. For raiding, personally, it feels low in comparison to other mythic kills when I look at the logs, but to the more casual player, it might seem high, but the thing to note is that this really isn't a DPS check anyway. High DPS definitely helps to make the phase transitions easier, but as you'll see in the kill video towards the end of the fight, I take my sweet ass time to kill the boss because I'm making sure I'm topped off, executing interrupts, and controlling the fight as best as I can. I even went into another phase 2 when I could have, and probably should have, just ended the fight then and there, but again, this fight is not really a DPS check. It's all about control and making sure that you're paying attention to as much as you can. Legendaries, I use Prydaz and the Destruction Belt. The belt is just all around good. If you don't have both of these, if you have Cephas' Secret instead, that's another great option for this fight. I even considered using it, but I thought I was getting more out of the other two. You're going to be interrupting and CCing the boss every 20 seconds, which means at a minimum you'll have this buff up about every 40 seconds. Prydaz, if you have it, is a good mistake cover. It helps you cover mistakes well. If you miss an interrupt, it will hurt, but you'll probably survive if Prydaz' shield is active. Again, I direct you to my kill and try to count how many interrupts I failed to do. I looking back in the kill, I can't believe that I've missed that many. Prydaz also aids Fell Armor with the consistent damage you'll be taking. After that, any DPS-based legendaries you have, if it's the Rift Shoulders, the Havoc Cape, I mean, whatever you got, use it. Consumables, every little bit helps. If you got flasks, make sure to pre-pot with a DPS potion, use health potions over health stones, get food buffs, bring an augment room, and also be sure to grab some drums for discount heroism, meaning it only gives 25% instead of 30%, but again, every little bit helps. Okay, on to the fight itself. This is a two-phase fight. It alternates between phases every 20 and 40 seconds. So you'll be returning to phase 1 after a minute into the fight, and every minute it'll cycle and start over again. There are 2 bosses, each with their own mechanics. One is a magma type worm. Is Cataclysm too old? It's a worm. It sits at the end of the platform. And then the other boss is a melee Tauren that melees and follows you around. We're going to start with the worm just because it's easiest to handle, and in large part you ignore it. During phase 1, it sits at the edge of the platform and hurls stuff at you. Even though it looks like it has a small health pool, take note of his buff. At the start of the fight, he has 9 stacks of 10% damage reduction, meaning he takes 90% less damage at first. So that approximately 50 million health pool is effectively 500 mil if you were just to sit there and damage it. During the first phase of the fight, it's a good idea to put a Havoc on him and whittle away at that health pool, even though it is 90% reduced. You will have to cast Havoc twice during that phase in order to maintain it up about 100%. The main ability you need to watch out for with the worm is Sonic Screech. If you are casting when he uses this ability, you will be interrupted and locked out of that school for 5 seconds. So if you're casting a Chaos Bolt, you're screwed because both your Shadow and Fire is locked out. The easiest way to handle this, I found, was to make the worm your focus target every time he appears in phase 1, so you can keep an eye on this cast bar. I'm assuming that in the near future the boss mods will have timers to track it for you, but until then you have to watch it yourself. When he casts Sonic Screech, use it as an opportunity to reapply Havoc. You'll cast it about that often anyways. After starting the fight at about 20 seconds, phase 2 starts when the Tauren boss casts Earthquake. The worm goes underground for the whole phase and chases you around. The Tauren Earthquake causes a few piles of rubble to fall from the ceiling. The goal with the worm is to have the worm go over the piles of rubble. Every time he does, he loses a stack of that damage reducing buff. It'll take at least 3 of these phases to get rid of all the stacks. More than likely it'll take 4 and 5 due to bad RNG. If the worm tunnels underneath you, it will stun you for a couple seconds. It's kind of annoying, but it's not really worth going out of your way to avoid. If it happens, it happens. Just deal with it and move on. 40 seconds later, the phase 2 ends and the worm appears back at the edge of the platform to repeat phase 1. The fight cycles like that until the Tauren boss dies, and then the worm enrages, dealing an extra 150% damage. The extra damage from the worm should be easily compensated by your fell armor. Hopefully you got rid of most of its stacks, so this phase won't last very long. If you get to this point, just wrap it up, play it safe, and keep yourself topped off while you finish killing the worm. And the fight ends when they're both dead. Alright, on to the Tauren boss. The first thing you'll notice is he places a giant green X on the ground centered on where you're currently standing. Move out of it. It's that simple. Second, big time Mage or Importante. Need to interrupt his Fell Burst. If you miss it, you'll probably die, and if you don't die, you'll take a shitload of damage and need to drain life to recover for a long time. Because this is technically a PvP fight, so the values are reduced and you're not going to be healing as much as you would in a raid setting. Most likely, you're going to die from it, so make sure to get that interrupt. Your pet is the thing that's going to be interrupting it, and it has a cooldown of about 24 seconds. The boss casts the Fell Burst about every 20 or 22 seconds. Basically, your pet can't get every single one. That is why you chose Mortal Coil or Shadow Fury as your interrupt. Again, assuming you chose Mortal Coil. And you're going to use it on him to fear him and interrupt the cast. So it's effectively an interrupt. On the rare occasion, both will be on cooldown. Every 4th one, essentially, it will be on cooldown, assuming you hit every one. You can also use a regular fear to interrupt that. Now, some of you may not have it on your bar because it's a PvP talent. Make sure to bind that sucker. You will have to use it. It has a longer cast time, so you need to be ready for it beforehand. You don't want to be on a global cooldown. You'll see in the kill video that when I know a Fell Burst is coming and I need to use a fear, I will sometimes sit and wait for it so I can cast fear immediately so I don't miss that cast. If all else fails and you absolutely cannot react in time to interrupt it, for instance, if you get stunned by a totem or the worm tripping you as it tunnels on by, then pop your Unending Resolve to mitigate 40% of your damage. And if you can and you're not topped off, make sure to pop a Hellstone to get as much life as you can so you can survive it. You'll probably still have to drain life to recover afterward, but at least you're not dead and you can keep going on with the fight. The third thing that this boss does, and it doesn't really need your attention, is he's gonna apply dots to you. They just deal consistent damage that we talked about. Ignore them. You don't need to pay any attention to it because, again, it's taken care of by your fell armor. As mentioned, when the Tauren boss casts Earthquake, the second phase starts. earthquake spawns robo piles that we mentioned already, and they also spawn worm eggs. If the eggs are not killed by the time their cast is complete, they spawn into worms, which is similar to Neltharian's lair with the grubs. Even if you can't kill the eggs before they spawn, whatever damage you deal to the eggs is carried over to the worm. Dots do not, unfortunately. So if you have an egg about to finish a cast and you're just starting to kill it, don't bother with an immolate. It's just a waste of a cast. When the eggs turn into worms, the worms throw green circles at you. Move out of them. If you don't move out of them, you start getting stacking debuff. It's just a small little circle. Just get out of them, and kill the worms as quickly as possible. The first phase 2 spawns 2 eggs. I'd recommend having the first egg that spawns, immolate the second, have your pet attack them, and then kill them as fast as you can. Be aware that in the middle of this ad phase, you will need to interrupt the boss, so watch for it. Subsequent phase 2s will spawn 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, etc. They keep adding 1 as the fight goes on. Because it gets harder as the fight goes on, I'd recommend saving your heroism drums for a 4 set. Especially one which you need some downtime afterwards to drain life and recover health and stabilize. Like if you miss an interrupt, for example. I'd recommend doing that over using the heroism at the start, even though you can probably get more damage on the boss, because the worm's health is not going to be affected as much as what you would do here. Make sure to use your second pot and soul harvest with your heroism, of course. So during the second phase 1, so after you've gone through your first phase 2, the Tauren boss is going to start regularly spawning totems for the rest of the fight. These totems slowly cast Fell Surge, and if they finish casting, you're stunned for 5 seconds. Do not let it finish casting. Any direct damage spell will kill it, even your Doomguard Shadow Bolt if you have to, like if you're stunned. This is where Fire and Brimstone really shines if you took that talent. Without it, I just popped a Conflagrator, a quick immolate to get rid of. Going back to the worm boss for a second, if you notice that the worm no longer has any stacks, you can skip dealing with phase 2 eggs. When the Tauren boss is casting Earthquake, fear him in the middle of that cast. It'll stop the robo from spawning and the eggs too. He will not go back into casting Earthquake. You'll skip that phase. You don't need the rubble to take out the stacks because, again, the worm doesn't have any of those stacks anymore. And that means that you won't have to deal with the eggs. Now, the worm will still tunnel underneath you like normal and stun you. And you'll be in that phase for 40 seconds. You just won't have to deal with those eggs, which is a good thing. One other thing I was thinking about after I finished this is that you may also want to start skipping this phase when you start getting 4 sets of eggs to spawn, even if the worm boss has a couple stacks of that damage reduction buff left. Just for some math's sake, if he has 1 stack, the worm has approximately an extra 5 million health or so, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things. 2 stacks, it has approximately a 12 mil. 3 stacks, it's getting over 20 mil, and again at 9 stacks, he effectively has 500 mil. So I'd recommend only skipping this phase if he has like 2 or less stacks. I never hit an enrage timer, but assume that there is one. Don't just skip this phase entirely the whole time. Doing 500 mil health to that worm while it's enraged, you're probably going to hit that enrage if there is one. After the fight's over, meaning after the Tauren boss dies and then you finish off the worm, head back in the way you came. Drogbar will greet you. He'll give you a portal to Dalaran, and you can get your new skin appearance. And if you've done that, congratulations. So thanks for watching. I did this at the last couple hours of the first Mage Tower before it fell. I will be doing Affliction and Demonology when the Mage Tower is rebuilt, so be sure to look for those videos in the end title card if you are finding this at some later date. Thanks again for watching, and here's the kill video.
A wall of flames! You go stop Dugar! I'll join you when I can! You only located me because I wanted to be found. Now I shall have vengeance on Thunder Totem. And you! ready to... What's this? Tugar has fallen. You had all the fun without me. With Tugar gone, the Fel Totem should present less of a threat. Even so, I will keep an eye on those treacherous fiends until their Legion Masters are defeated. Your Kirin Tor have given me one of their portal crystals. No doubt they will be pleased to hear of your success. Many thanks, hero. We will meet again.
Light be with you. Be careful.